Long before missionaries arrived in Africa, a carved mask was never just a piece of wood. It was a voice for the gods, a mirror of ancestors, and a message board for the living. Families hung masks on compound walls to bless the home with protection and beauty. Priests wore them in sacred dances to let spirits speak through human lips. Elders could gaze at the shapes and colors of a single mask and understand exactly what story the carver had told without hearing a word. Then strangers came. They called the masks demonic, fetish, and urged people to throw them away. Some obeyed, ashamed of what had once shaped their identity. Others hid their masks in forest shrines, vowing never to lose the wisdom carved into every curved line. This is the story of one such village, Yukam, and how the struggle over a single sacred mask became a battle between old faith and new, between greed and reverence, between the patience of the gods and the folly of men. Hello friends, enjoy this relaxing moment with Valentino's stories. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments section, and generously hit the like button because it means a lot to us. Please relax and enjoy as we dive in the story. In the heart of thick green forest, where two clear rivers curl like silver snakes through dark soil, sat the small village of Yukam. It looked ordinary to strangers, just round mud huts, palm trees, and narrow footpaths, yet its name traveled far on the lips of traders and wandering singers. Yukam was known for endless yam mounds, fish that almost leapt into baskets, and people who grew old with strong bones and bright eyes. Illness was rare, sorrow was light, and laughter floated on every evening breeze. The villagers believed their good fortune did not come from luck. They said it flowed from the sky throne of Chukwu, the great creator, and from the warm lap of Ani, gentle goddess of the earth, harvest, and fertile wombs. At dawn mothers whispered Chukwu's praise while drawing water. At noon farmers paused between hoe strokes, touched the soil, and thanked Ani for its softness. Children learned these holy names before they learned to count. Each afore market day the village square became a living altar. Women carried woven trays of ripe plantain, men brought clay pots of palm wine, hunters laid fresh bushmeat before the carved shrine. Drums started a slow heartbeat, flutes wept happily, and dancers painted with white clay circled the offering fire. When a kola nut cracked cleanly in the priest's hand, everyone cheered, certain Ani had accepted the gift. Before sunset the offerings were shared with the poor, so even charity felt like worship. Yet Yukam's faith was not all gentle songs. Beyond the last farm ridge lay shadowed groves where the Urusi dwelled. These spirits were as old as the first tree root and as fierce as harmattan wind. Their faces were captured in wooden masks hung high in the forest shrine. Some masks grinned with sharp teeth, others stared with hollow eyes. Red lines of goat blood dried on the rough wood as a warning, disturb the sacred grove and pay with your life. At night elders told stories of hunters who ignored such warnings and never came home. Because of that fear the people balanced devotion with caution. They greeted every fallen leaf with respect, never cut certain trees, and always released the first fish caught in a new net. They believed the Urusi watched these small acts and weighed the people's hearts. From surrounding hills, visitors came to trade or to seek healing. Many left scratching their heads. They tasted the same water, felt the same sun, yet their own villages fought drought and fever. Surely Yukam hides a secret charm, they muttered. Some laughed and said the tales about Ani were only clever tricks to keep strangers out. Jealous tongues wagged, but the blessings of Yukam flowed on like a calm river. Inside Yukam, elders met by moonlight to repeat a simple warning. Fortune is a rope made of promises to the gods. Cut one strand and the rope will snap. Children listened wide-eyed as the oldest grandmother whispered, "Remember, blessings can turn to curses quicker than dry grass catches fire." Then she blew out her palm oil lamp, and the stars over Yukam seemed to wink in solemn agreement. So the village slept, surrounded by dark forest and shining rivers, confident yet careful, rich yet humble, always aware that unseen eyes guarded every yam hill and every cradle. They could not imagine how quickly that balance would be tested, or how a single greedy hand might awaken the anger of spirits older than memory. Truly, destiny was on its way. The afternoon sun hung high, turning every banana leaf into a sheet of bright glass. Women pounded yam in smooth mortars, children chased each other between cassava rows, and old men dozed under a udala tree. Nothing seemed unusual, until the horn of the village watchman sounded twice and died away like a broken flute. People looked toward the narrow footpath that linked Yukam to the outside world. 5 figures walked in single file, dust swirling around their shoes. Their skin was the pale color of ripe cocoyam flesh, and their clothes, stiff coats, round hats, shone like tin roofs. At the front marched a young man the villagers knew, Obi, son of late farmer Ogbuefi Adindu. Years earlier he had vanished with missionaries and stories of a foreign god. Now Obi's steps were confident, his voice smooth in two tongues. Each time he spoke, the white men nodded. One carried a small leather book, another a brass spyglass. The tallest held a wooden box that clicked like hidden metal. News flew ahead of them. By the time they reached the village square, nearly everyone had gathered. Elder Obiarika, tall, lean, his beard white as river foam, stood at the center with other gray-haired advisors. Drumbeats stopped, market chatter froze. Chickens darted for cover as silence spread. Obi removed his hat and bowed low. "My fathers," he began, "I return with friends who wish only peace. They speak of a loving God who welcomes every heart." His Igbo words rolled out as clearly as the English ones he used for the strangers. Obiarika's brows knit together. He did not shout, but his deep voice carried. "We know of this God. In Bano, your teacher set new rules that split families and seized farmlands in the name of paper laws. Why bring confusion here?" The visitors shifted uneasily. One white man stepped forward, smiling, but Obiarika lifted a hand and the man stopped. "Obi," the elder continued, "Chukwu sends rain, Ani guards our soil. What gift can you bring that is greater than the food in our barns or the children in our courtyards?" Some villagers nodded hard, arms folded. Others leaned in, curious about the strangers' shiny shoes and soft voices. A widow whispered, "Maybe they know medicine for fever." A hunter muttered, "Or maybe they hunt souls." Obi felt sweat crawl down his neck. He tried to explain that his companions wished to teach letters and numbers, to share songs of mercy. But Obiarika's raised palm silenced him. "Enough for today. Let the air cool, and our minds as well." The elder pointed toward the old communal hut at the square's edge. "You may sleep there, eat our yam, drink our water. But you will do nothing else until the council speaks again." Grateful for any shelter, Obi guided the white men across the square. Children followed at a distance, giggling at the way the strangers' hats bobbed like mushrooms after rain. Inside the hut, dust floated in golden beams of light. A mat still lay where Obi's father once snored after long farm days. Memories pricked Obi's heart, yet he focused on the task ahead. When dusk painted the sky orange, fireflies blinked outside the doorway. The visitors sat in a half-circle while Obi translated their hurried whispers. They must show goodwill quickly or lose all chance. One suggested giving mirrors, another spoke of teaching the alphabet on a slate. Obi warned them, "The people respect strength, but they honor patience more. We must move like a careful goat around a new rope." Far away, drums started again, slow, questioning beats. Through the thin mud wall, the men heard voices singing ancient praise to Ani as cooking fires lit up the compound like small moons. Obi felt torn between two worlds, one in his blood, one in his mouth. He lay awake long after the visitors slept, staring at the rafters where a lizard hunted moths. Tomorrow he would face the elders once more. He practiced words in both languages, hoping to bridge a river wider than any map could show. Outside, night insects hummed, a soft warning that dawn would test every promise. Morning light spilled across the village square like warm oil. The elders were already seated on low wooden stools, staffs resting beside wrinkled legs. Women who sold pepper at the market stood at a distance, wiping hands on wrappers, eager to see what the pale strangers would do next. Chickens scratched near the shrine, and a thin thread of smoke rose from a cooking hearth close by. Obi led the 4 visitors forward. Their boots left neat prints in the sandy earth. None of them spoke until they reached the elders' circle. Then Johnson, tallest of the group, opened a woven bag and lifted a smooth, shining plate of glass. Sunlight bounced from its surface like water on a windy day. Children gasped and pushed closer. For the first time, villagers saw their own faces clearly, eyes wide, teeth bright, hair swirling in a frame of sky. Some squealed in delight, others stepped back, afraid the image might trap their spirits. Next, Edwin pulled a small metal stick from his pocket. He pressed its head against a dry leaf and rolled a thumb. A sudden spark popped, blooming into a finger-length flame. The leaf crumpled with a hiss. People shouted, half in wonder, half in fear. Edwin explained in slow English. Obi repeated in Igbo, "No juju, just a tool. We can show you how it works." A few men whispered that it would be useful for lighting evening hearths when harmattan winds blew fierce. Obiarika rose, leaning on his staff. He thanked the guests with measured words, neither rude nor warm. "We will think on these signs of friendship," he said. Then he dismissed the crowd. The strangers returned to the visitor's hut, hearts pounding with hope. Throughout that day the elders argued beneath an udara tree. Some praised the idea of learning foreign skills, others warned of hidden traps. At last they agreed to meet the visitors again. A messenger, barefoot, quick as a squirrel, ran to the hut and told Obi to bring his friends at first cockcrow. Next dawn arrived crisp and blue. In the center of the square the elders waited, faces stern but curious. Obiarika spoke first. "Tell us plainly," he said, "what you ask in return for your mirrors and fire sticks." Johnson answered through Obi, "We request a piece of land. We wish to build one house for worship and one house for teaching letters and numbers. All may enter. No payment required." He folded his hands, head slightly bowed. The elders conferred in low voices. Fields were plentiful, refusing land seemed small-minded. After a short pause, Obiarika nodded. "You may have a strip near the western riverbank. It is unused ground where children chase grasshoppers." Gratitude flooded the visitors' eyes. They bowed, promised goodwill, and left to plan. Within 2 days construction started. Village youths, glad for any job that paid cowries, felled young palm trees, peeled bark, and shaped straight poles. Women wove long mats from raffia for the walls. The white men sweated alongside them, surprising many who thought foreigners could not wield a machete. Howard handled a hammer clumsily. Nathan fetched water from the stream more than once. Laughter bridged the gap of language as work songs rose in both Igbo and accented English. By the 7th morning the frames of 2 large huts stood tall. Palm thatch roofs spread like wide hats, and clay floors dried smooth under midday sun. One building faced east. It would serve as the school. The other faced west toward the setting sun. Johnson said light through the doorway at dusk would remind worshippers of heaven's glow. Payment time came at sunset. Each laborer expected 4 cowries, as announced on the first day. Johnson counted piles of shells into Obi's hands, trusting him to share. Obi, remembering his own empty purse, slipped half into a goatskin pouch tucked under his belt. He gave every worker 2 cowries instead. Some frowned but accepted, thinking perhaps they had misheard the earlier promise. Whispered grumbling drifted through the night air, though no one dared challenge Obi, a villager returned from distant lands. Classes began the following week. The elders sent a few bold children and 2 curious young men. On the first morning, Nathan chalked the letter A on a slate, pronouncing it slowly. The learners copied in dust on the floor, tongues poking from lips in concentration. Edwin pointed to a map pinned on the wall, tracing the outline of Africa and then a tiny island across the sea called Britain. Gasps and giggles filled the room. None had imagined the world so large. Outside, women pounding fufu paused to listen to the strange rhythm of English vowels. Some nodded in approval. Knowledge could not be harmful, they thought. Others shook heads, muttering that a person who writes in foreign symbols might soon forget ancestral songs. Evening fell. Johnson opened the worship hut for the first prayer. He sang a gentle chant. Obi echoed in Igbo, speaking of love and forgiveness. A few villagers stepped inside, curious about the foreign god. Candle flames flickered against mud walls, casting soft halos around carved stools. Meanwhile, Obiarika watched from the square, arms folded. The new hut stood solid, gifts sparkled in many homes, and young voices practiced new words. Yet the elder's mind held a single iron thought: gifts bind a man's hands as tightly as rope. The bargain was made. But its true cost had yet to unfold. Evening clouds glowed red as the sun sank behind oil palm trees. Smoke from cooking fires curled above low roofs, carrying the smell of roasted fish. Inside the visitor's hut, lantern light flickered on rough mud walls. Johnson, the tall priest, sat at a wooden table turning brittle pages of his Bible, but his mind was somewhere else. Edward paced like a caged animal, boots tapping the clay floor. When he heard footsteps outside, he stopped and motioned to Johnson. Obi stepped through the doorway, wiping dust from his face after a long day of teaching letters. Johnson closed the Bible and nodded to Edward, signaling it was time. Edward leaned close to Obi, voice low as a snake in dry grass. "We did not come only to teach," he whispered. "We need the head mask of the uneasy for our museum. When will you bring it?" Obi swallowed hard. He had heard village tales about that mask since childhood, stories of warriors who vanished after touching it, of lightning that danced around the shrine at night. Yet greed tugged at him. He pictured piles of cowries, fine cloth from Europe, maybe even a journey across the sea. He managed a shaky smile. "Tonight," he answered. After supper, the village grew quiet. Dogs barked once, then settled. The moon, thin like a broken calabash, hid behind drifting clouds. Obi wrapped a dark cloth around his shoulders and slipped out of the compound. He moved quickly through narrow footpaths, avoiding dry leaves that might crunch underfoot. Frogs croaked along the stream, and distant drums beat a slow rhythm from the far end of Yukam. Soon tall iroko trees surrounded him. Their branches twisted above the sacred grove where the uneasy shrine stood. A cold wind blew, though it was the middle of hot season. Obi's heart hammered. He reached the wooden fence marking forbidden ground, hesitated, then ducked under. White chalk symbols glowed faintly on the path, warning trespassers, but Obi forced himself forward, whispering a short prayer he half believed. Inside the shrine clearing, the head mask rested on a stone pedestal. Its face had bulging eyes, wide nostrils, and a mouth fixed in a silent roar. Dried blood streaked its cheeks, and rooster feathers clung to the edge. Obi's breath caught. He glanced around. No guards, no elders, only the hush of deep night. He stretched both arms toward the mask, palms sweaty. When his fingers touched the wood, a chill spread up his arms. He tightened his grip and tried to lift. The mask felt glued to the stone. He strained, muscles shaking, but it would not budge. Then the sky cracked open. A single thunderclap exploded above the grove. Blue light flashed, turning every leaf silver. Obi was thrown backward as if an invisible hand had slapped him. He hit the earth, dust puffing around his body, ears ringing like village gongs. For a moment he lay still, staring at treetops swirling against lightning-lit clouds. Fear rushed through him like cold water. Scrambling to his feet, he sprinted away, stumbling over roots, branches whipping his face. Not once did he look back. When he reached the mission hut, sweat soaked his tunic. Johnson and Edward jumped up. "Where is it?" Edward demanded. Obi's voice cracked. "I tried," he gasped. "The mask will not move." Thunder struck the sky. "Its power is too strong. I cannot go back." Edward's jaw tightened, but Johnson placed a calming hand on his shoulder. Obi sank onto a stool, chest heaving, eyes wide with terror. Outside, thunder rolled again in slow warning, as if the shrine itself were growling, "Come no closer." The night swallowed the sound, leaving the men in uneasy silence. First light painted the thatch roof's pale gold when a panting boy burst into the healer's compound. His voice shook as he explained that someone had entered the sacred grove during the night and fled empty-handed after thunder split the sky. Chickens scattered as the message spread from mouth to mouth, louder with each retelling. By mid-morning, an anxious crowd had formed outside the home of Nwankwo, the village dibia, keeper of secrets, reader of signs, servant of the unseen. Nwankwo was not young. Deep lines marked years spent listening to wind and river, yet his eyes shone like fresh palm oil. He stepped from the cool shade of his hut in a robe dyed the color of charcoal, eagle feather tucked in his hair. He lifted one hand for silence. The murmurs fell away, replaced by the distant croak of frogs along the stream. "I have heard," he said, voice even and low. The grove was disturbed, but panic feeds chaos. Let the gods judge the matter. Without haste, he led the people toward the shrine near the forest edge. A small boy carried a calabash of sweet palm wine. An elderly woman followed with a wooden plate holding 4 fresh kola nuts. Inside the clearing the air felt thick, as if trees held their breath. Nwankwo knelt before the stone pedestal, still smeared with last season's rooster blood. He poured wine in a slow circle, letting it soak into the earth. "Spirits of the land," he intoned, "drink and know we honor you." He cracked each kola nut, placing the white pieces carefully on the pedestal's flat top. Then he bowed until his forehead touched dust. His lips moved in a whisper only the spirits could hear. A sudden wind rustled the leaves overhead, though no storm cloud lingered. The people looked at one another, half afraid, half relieved that the Dibia's prayer seemed welcomed. Rising, Nwankwo faced them. "Fear not," he announced. "Sacred things guard themselves. Whoever reached for what is forbidden has invited judgment upon his own head. The jaws of justice may close slowly, but they never loosen." He instructed everyone to continue daily tasks, farm, fish, weave, as proof of trust in their protectors. Panicked idleness, he warned, would only give strength to evil intentions. Women exhaled in unison. Men shifted spears from one shoulder to the other, comforted by clear direction. Still, whispers curled like wood smoke. Who had dared? Some suspected curious youth, others blamed jealous traders from nearby villages. No one mentioned the missionaries aloud, yet eyes drifted toward the western path where their new huts stood. Throughout the afternoon, Nwankwo remained near the shrine. He sprinkled powdered chalk in 4 lines pointing north, south, east, and west, a sign forbidding further trespass. At sunset, he lit a bundle of dry herbs whose smoke carried a sharp, peppery scent, said to blind spying spirits. Night returned with singing insects and a rim of stars. Families huddled around cooking fires, retelling the Dibia's words to children too young to witness the ritual. Above them the forest loomed, quiet but alert. Somewhere within its darkness an unseen watcher, divine or mortal, waited. The people of Yukam slept knowing they had placed their trust in forces older than memory, certain that those forces had already begun their silent hunt. Night draped Yukam in thick velvet. The new church hut glimmered with a single candle, but far from that gentle glow, Obi sat alone inside the mud walls of his late father's house. He could still smell dried cassava from years ago, yet his mind churned on nothing but shining cowries and promises from distant lands. A crate already stood ready in the corner, half filled with cola sacks, the box meant to hide the next sacred trophies. Obi clenched his fists. He had failed once to move the Urusi mask, but failure only sharpened his hunger. The white men had offered more shells than he would ever earn teaching children their ABC. All he needed was a bold partner, someone who feared neither curse nor thunder. At that very moment, laughter drifted from a palm wine shed near the bush path. Lamps hung from crooked bamboo posts, and men sat on wooden benches slurping thick, milky liquid. Among them was Ikenta, a tall fellow whose flashy red cap and loose tongue made him famous for mischief. If a goat disappeared, neighbors whispered his name. If a cockfight ended in sudden quarrel, Ikenta's grin was never far away. Obi tightened his wrapper and walked to the shed. He ordered a fresh calabash of wine and placed it in front of Ikenta. Foam spilled over as the gourd tipped. Ikenta wiped his mouth, curious. "Friend," Obi began softly, "how would you like real money?" Ikenta raised an eyebrow. "More than these sour drops." 10 cowries for every Urusi head mask you bring me," Obi said, voice barely above the hum of crickets. The drinker paused mid-swallow, eyes widening like a startled bush baby. "So you're the midnight hand the Dibia warned about?" "Quiet," Obi hissed, sliding 3 bright shells across the table. "This is only a taste. The rest comes after each delivery." Greed melted Ikenta's caution. He pocketed the shells, smacked his lips, and agreed with a nod. Still, he knew the Urusi shrine could roast a thief's soul alive. Courage alone would not save him. When night deepened, Ikenta slipped out of the village, following a narrow track that smelled of wild ginger. The moon hid behind ragged clouds, guiding him only with pale silver patches on the leaves. After 2 hours he reached a rocky hill whose side gaped open like a great mouth. This was the lair of the dreaded one-eyed Dibia, a healer expelled from Yukam long ago for crafts that twisted flesh and bent fate. Inside the cave hung flickering oil lamps trapped in goat horn cages. Bones dangled from strings, goat, monkey, perhaps even human. In the center, the Dibia sat cross-legged on a leopard skin, one empty socket covered with a leather patch, the other eye bright as hot coals. Ikenta explained his quest. "I need power to take masks from Yukam's grove and leave unharmed." A raspy chuckle echoed against stone. "Many fear the unseen claws of the Urusi," the old man said. "But wood is wood, made by mortal hands. If your heart is harder than cedar, You may carry it away. He laid out his tools, a bunch of fresh palm fronds, a duck egg speckled with gray, and a pouch of black powder that smelled of burnt pepper and bitter cola pulp. "Listen," the dibia whispered, rolling the egg across his palm. "Plait 2 frond bracelets for your arms. Bite 1 frond between your teeth so its juice covers your tongue. When you stand before the mask, drop this egg to break the spirit's mirror. Strike the wood 3 times with the frond, then lift fast. Do not speak. Do not look backward until you pass the last iroko tree." Ikenta gulped but nodded. He promised a goat and a jug of palm oil if the charm worked. The dibia's single eye gleamed with hunger at the thought. The following night, clouds smothered the moon, and frogs squeaked warnings from flooded grass. Ikenta crept toward the arusi grove. No guard kept watch. Fear itself was gate and spear. He wrapped the fronds, slid another strip between his teeth, and stepped over the chalk boundary. Before him loomed the first mask, its carved cheeks painted red, its jaw edged in crocodile teeth. Ikenta's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He raised the egg and let it fall. It burst with a soft crack. Yolk oozed like melted sunrise onto the earth. He struck the mask thrice. Nothing happened. No thunder, no whisper, only the night's heavy breath. Hands trembling yet strong, he lifted the mask. It came away as easily as a calabash from a rope hook. Giddy with relief, he repeated the task twice more, choosing 2 smaller masks with owl-like eyes. Sweat dripped into his mouth, mixing with bitter palm juice. He hurried from the grove, knees nearly giving way when he crossed the final iroko's shadow. Only then did he dare glance behind him. The forest stood silent, as if politely watching a thief depart. Long before cocks crowed, Ikenta tapped on Obi's shutter. Lantern light revealed 3 trophies stacked like sleeping faces. Obi's grin spread wide. He lined 30 cowries in neat rows, counting aloud. Ikenta grabbed the shells, nerves still jangling, and slipped into darkness, vowing to appear fearless if anyone asked why he suddenly smelled of forest rain. Inside the hut, Obi dropped the masks into his waiting crate. He pictured Johnson praising him, Edward adding more shells to the promise, maybe a voyage across seas deep as night. Yet for all his dreaming, he missed the faint rustle that passed through the rafters like an angry sigh. For high up among the rafters, unseen eyes had watched. In the forest, chalk lines had snapped like dry twigs. Air itself seemed to ripple with withheld outrage. The gods of Yukam had marked the offender and his helper. And though the night remained still, the earth prepared its reply, slow and certain as dawn. Sunlight had barely touched the tops of raffia palms when agitated voices swept across Yukam. 3 masked keepers burst into the elder's courtyard, shirts half-buttoned, eyes wide with terror. "Our head masks are gone," they cried, dropping to their knees. "It is a grave taboo. Whoever did this has mocked the spirits." Elder Obiarika and his council rushed to the shrine clearing. Empty hooks swung slowly in the breeze. Scraps of dried feather danced on the red clay floor. Old women wailed, remembering legends of drought and sickness that once followed a missing mask. Chickens fled into bushes as if sensing danger. The elders summoned Nwankwo the dibia at once. He arrived with calm steps, cowskin bag slung over one shoulder. Kneeling, he touched the pedestal where the masks had rested, then lifted his hand for silence. "Do not panic," he told the crowd. "The gods strike on their own clock. The guilty foot will soon stumble." He poured palm wine onto the soil and placed cola segments in 4 directions, asking invisible protectors to keep the village safe until justice ripened. While villagers stayed busy mending fences and whispering prayers, Ikenta led a goat, a yam, and a jug of strong drink along a hidden trail to the cave of the one-eyed dibia. The outlawed sorcerer grinned when he saw the offerings. "My spell still shields you," he croaked. "Go back and gather more trophies." Ikenta bowed, relief flooding him. In his pocket clinked 10 fresh cowries from the last delivery. Night after night, Ikenta slipped into the grove, used his palm frond ritual, and hurried away with sacred masks wrapped in banana leaves. Each dawn he met Obi behind the old yam barn. Obi packed the objects into wooden crates, nailed the lids shut, and paid his accomplice without counting twice. A fisherman waiting by the river ferried the boxes downstream, where white traders loaded them onto broad canoes bound for the coast. Weeks later, Mr. Edward cornered Obi beside the new school hut. His voice held both excitement and greed. "The smaller masks are fine," he said, "but our sponsors want the grand piece, the village mask with the horned forehead. Bring it to me, and I shall give you 5 times your usual fee." He pressed a pouch of cowries into Obi's palm as a promise. Obi wasted no time. He found Ikenta near the palm wine shed and whispered, 30 cowries for the big one." Ikenta's face tightened. "That mask commands storms," he warned. Still, the thought of so many shells made his heartbeat race. "Give me a few nights," he agreed, licking dry lips. On the appointed night, Ikenta repeated his routine: frond bracelets, egg sacrifice, silent strikes. The moment he touched the massive horned mask, lightning split the sky. A deafening crack shook the grove, sparks hissed along tree trunks. Ikenta shrieked and bolted through the darkness. Okonkwo, the chief priest, hearing the thunder, rushed out and caught a glimpse of the fleeing figure. Before dawn, word of the attempted theft spread like harmattan fire. At the village square, Okonkwo declared, "I saw him with my own eyes." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elders ordered 2 strong guards to drag Ikenta from his hut. Dust flew as he struggled, shouting, "Lies! I have done nothing." "If you are innocent," Elder Obirika said, "prove it before the oracle. Swear an oath on Eek market day." Ikenta's stomach churned, yet he raised his chin. "I accept." The date was fixed 4 days ahead. That night Ikenta met Obi behind a millet stack. "I need more money for sacrifices," he pleaded. Obi handed him 10 extra cowries and thanked him for keeping silent about any partners. At dawn Ikenta crept back to the outlaw's cave. The one-eyed Dibia listened, shaking his head. "The village mask carries weight beyond ordinary charms," he muttered. "But we can outwit the oracle." From a clay bowl he lifted a foul-smelling vulture egg. "Drink this. Its spirit will mask your face. Do not taste oil before the oath. Wear this waist cord. Feathers sewn inside will confuse the shrine." He tied a leather strap around Ikenta's waist and spoke a curse on anyone who dared expose their plan. Eek day arrived under a moody gray sky. At first cockcrow Ikenta, pale but defiant, stood before a crowd packed so tightly that not even goats could squeeze through. Toddlers clung to mothers, warriors clutched spears, the new missionaries watched from a distance, unsure whether to pray or run. Inside the shrine, the oracle stool glimmered with fresh palm oil. The chief priest motioned Ikenta forward. Kneeling, Ikenta shouted, "If I stole the masks, may the gods swell my body with elephant disease and strike me dead." Okonkwo pounded his staff. The assembly roared, "Iz!" and leaned in for the usual swift retribution. Nothing happened. No wind, no thunder, not even a shiver. Ikenta rose with a crooked smile. Astonishment froze every tongue. In earlier times, a liar would have burst into boils by the 3rd heartbeat. Yet this man walked out, step steady, head high. Night dropped its veil. Believing himself invincible, Ikenta tiptoed back to the grove, waist charm prickling against his skin. The horned mask still waited, glinting beneath a slice of moon. He followed the ritual, egg crack, palm frond strikes, and lifted the heavy wood. No lightning came, only the chirp of night insects. Grinning, he hurried away and laid the treasure at Obi's door. As he vanished into shadows, a low rumble pulsed beneath the earth, too deep for human ears but loud enough for spirits. The land had witnessed the lie, swallowed it, and begun to stir. Justice, though delayed, was rolling forward like a hidden river, its flood inevitable. Moonlight washed over Yukam when Ikenta slipped through narrow footpaths with a heavy bundle on his back. Inside the cloth rested the horned village mask, largest of all Arusi images. Ash from old sacrifices still clung to its ridges, and a scent like rain-soaked earth followed it. At Obi's door he tapped twice. Obi lifted the latch, lantern in hand. The glow struck the mask's carved eyes, making them sparkle like wet stones. His breath caught. Greed burned hotter than fear. He set the lantern down, stroked the rough wood once, then counted 30 white cowries onto a mat. "Excellent work," he murmured. Ikenta stuffed the shells into a skin pouch, chuckled, and hurried away, certain he had defeated every spirit in the forest. Night closed again, and for a moment Yukam was calm. Yet above the roofs a strange hush spread, as if even insects paused to listen. At first Rooster Crow, confusion shattered the village peace. A masked keeper rushed from the grove, shouting until his voice cracked. Farmers dropped hoes. Women abandoned water pots. Within minutes the square filled with frightened faces. "The great mask is gone!" children cried. Old men beat their chests, knowing the mask was believed to guard the health of soil, river, and sky. Panic rolled like thunder. Some blamed jealous neighbors, others pointed trembling fingers toward the missionaries' huts. No one could prove anything. Meanwhile, far downstream, Mr. Edward had already hidden the relic in a canoe bound for the coast. Cattle bells and early morning chatter drowned the soft splash of paddles carrying Yukam's oracle away. With no clue how to fix the disaster, the elders led the people to the village stream, sacred gateway to Ani, Mother of Earth. They carried gifts, fresh coconuts, bleeding goats, gourds of palm oil, and lined the bank from reed bed to large flat rock. Wives sang old lullabies to calm crying babies. Hunters knelt, spears laid across their laps, heads bowed. Elder Obiarika raised his walking staff. "Great Ani," he called, voice quivering, "accept our offering. Show your children the hidden serpent that has bitten us." Women poured red oil into the current. Men broke coconuts and cast them upon the water. Goat blood swirled, dyeing the stream pink. A stillness fell so deep that the splash of a single fish sounded like a drum. Sky that had been clear moments earlier darkened without clouds. Then a blinding white line ripped downward. When the brilliant flash vanished, the villagers gasped. Water in the center of the creek had risen into a spinning pillar. Inside the liquid tower a luminous figure formed, tall, crowned with leaves, eyes glowing amber. Ani had arrived. Her voice rumbled like distant rockslides. "Your wound is fresh, but the knife is near," she said. "The hand that bleeds you hides among your own. Remove the strangers who guide him, and my earth shall move against him." Sand underfoot trembled in agreement. No one dared question. Mothers pressed foreheads to mud. Warriors lifted machetes high in silent pledge. When the goddess faded, the water collapsed with a hiss, leaving only ripples and a cold hush. Within the hour, a crowd armed with sticks, farm hoes, and raw anger stormed toward the mission compound. The two new huts, one for prayer, one for lessons, stood quiet under the rising sun. Villagers surrounded them, pounding on doors, shouting that the gods had spoken. Inside, Johnson, Edward, Howard, and Nathan exchanged fearful glances. They stepped out slowly, palms raised. Johnson tried to speak of peace, but his words drowned in the roar of the crowd. "Leave," elders barked. "Take your strange fire and mirrors with you." The missionaries gathered a few belongings and followed the furious procession to the western boundary path. Chickens scattered, and curious children trailed behind, tossing pebbles into the dust. Only when the strangers passed the final Irako tree did the mob halt. Some spat on the ground for emphasis, others whispered uncertain prayers, wondering if chasing men away could mend a spiritual wound. As the foreigners disappeared, tension did not. Eyes turned toward Obi's compound. Rumors hissed like snakes. He traveled often at night, his pockets now jingled with new wealth, and he alone could speak for the strangers. Yet nobody lifted a hand against him. "Obi is still our blood," Obiarika said gravely, lifting his staff as if to hold back vengeance until heaven's court convened. "If he is guilty, let powers greater than ours write the verdict." The expelled men were gone, but Yukam's sky remained gray. Children who once laughed at dawn sat quietly by cooking fires. The river's chatter sounded deeper, like a warning drum beneath the usual song. High in the forest, wind rattled dry leaves though the season was still green. Paths felt colder under bare feet. Even bold hunters sensed eyes staring from shadows. Yukam understood, divine anger might slow its pace, yet every step brought it closer. And somewhere in his hut, Obi felt a chill he could not explain, though the night was warm and still. Obi watched smoke drift over the evening rooftops and felt proud of his secret fortune. Yes, the white strangers had been forced across the western boundary, but he still had their river contacts and a promise of gold-colored shells. All he needed was a fresh supply of masks. In his mind, he saw himself wearing bright cloth in distant ports, bragging about how clever he had been to outwit village taboos. Crickets began their dusk chorus, yet the ground under his bamboo stool felt strangely warm, as if coals glowed beneath the soil. Obi ignored the unease. He sorted cowries into neat rows, counting future profits instead of present warnings. Behind him, the crate that held the horned mask waited for canoe men who would arrive after moonrise. While Obi planned, Ikenta trudged along a narrow animal track far outside Yukam. Dew soaked his ankles, but he smiled each time the pouch of cowries slapped against his thigh. He carried a small gourd of palm wine and a coiled rope to guide the goat he owed the one-eyed Dibia. Bars of dawn light striped the forest floor by the time he reached the cave mouth. Inside smelled of old smoke and bitter herbs. Ikenta expected to hear the raspy greeting of the sorcerer. Instead, silence pressed around him like damp cloth. A soot-blackened lamp still burned, though its wick was almost ash. At the back of the grotto, the Dibia lay face down on leopard skin. His patched eye stared glassy at nothing. His good eye, fixed forever open, reflected the quivering flame. No blood, no struggle, just a body abandoned by its own heart. Ikenta's pulse hammered. He backed away, tripped over a hanging gourd, and fled before the lamp's flame reached the floor. It smashed, sending sparks along the dusty hide. The cave swallowed the noise as if eager to keep it secret. Branches whipped Ikenta's arms as he raced toward home. The journey felt twice as long. He dared not glance behind for fear of seeing the Dibia's ghost. When he crossed the last yam ridge, his hut came into view. Smoke from a cooking fire curled peacefully through its thatch. Relief sagged his shoulders. He pushed the door but stopped mid-step. The room glowed reddish like sunset trapped indoors. In the center floated the stolen village mask, horn points aimed at the roof. A low hum vibrated the air, shaking the calabashes hung on the wall. Ikenta froze, his skin prickled. An invisible fist punched his stomach. Pain shot downward, swelling began, flesh stretching so fast he howled. The curse he had once pronounced in arrogance, elephantiasis of the scrotum, now bloomed on him like poisonous fruit. He toppled, fingers clawing the mat. His cries ripped through the quiet lanes. Two farmers pounding cassava heard and sprinted over. They found Ikenta twisting in agony, feverish sweat shining under the supernatural glow. "Take me to the square," he gasped. "I must speak before I die." The men fashioned a sling from a fishing net and hauled him through shocked bystanders. Dogs barked and scattered. At the center of Yukam, elders assembled with alarming speed, for word of curses travels faster than wind. Children hid behind their mothers as they saw Ikenta's terrible swelling. Elder Obiarika spoke first, voice hoarse. "Tell us the truth that scorches your tongue." Tears cut paths down Ikenta's dusty cheeks. He confessed it all, how Obi hired him, how the one-eyed Dibia armed him with charms, how stolen masks rowed hidden canoes downstream while the village slept. With every sentence the people moaned, shaking heads in disbelief and sorrow. When Ikenta finished, silence pressed so hard it felt like weight on the shoulders. Even the breeze hesitated. Then Obiarika signaled 4 strong youths. "Bring Obi." They ran. Moments later they returned slower, carrying nothing but dread in their eyes. "Elder," one whispered, "Obi is beyond questioning." The crowd parted to reveal a doorframe darkened by death. Obi lay on his mat, throat rigid in a final gasp, eyes round with terror. The same monstrous swelling defaced his body. Cowries he had counted only hours earlier scattered like seeds around him. The crate beside the bed was empty. The mask that cursed him had already flown to pass judgment on its first thief. Mothers began to wail, not from pity for Obi but from deep fear of gods who strike so completely. The elders poured libation in the dust beside his threshold, asking the land to calm its anger now that the offenders lay low. For 3 days drums sounded the lament rhythm. Masks left inside the grove were scrubbed with river sand and rehung. The shrine was repaired with fresh palm fronds, white chalk lines redrawn, and a spotless ram offered so that Ani and Chukwu might heal the scar across Yukam's soul. Fields went untended during the cleansing, yet no one complained. Hunger was easier to bear than another divine blow. When normal work resumed, the village stood changed. A few families still whispered foreign hymns at night, but they kept one ear tuned for distant thunder. Most people returned fully to ancestral practice, bowing lower when they passed the grove, guiding children to sprinkle cola crumbs before tasting new yam. Seedlings sprouted in repaired ridges, fish returned to nets, and babies' first cries sounded healthy again. Blessings had not fled forever, only slept beneath a blanket of warning. The elders carved a small tablet and placed it near the square. No hand may rise against the gods and remain whole. The soil witnesses every secret, and justice, though slow, never forgets a footstep. Villagers touched the carving each morning, reminding themselves and their descendants that wealth bought with sacrilege always becomes sand. In the hush of pre-dawn, when dew cooled hard-packed earth, one could almost feel the land breathing peacefully again, satisfied that balance had been restored. Thanks for watching. Please comment where you are watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.